Welcome to Shop Squad's Now You Know, a podcast that brings you compelling conversations about today's technical training resources. For information, visit shopsquadonline.com. Hi again, everybody. Welcome back to NGK's Shop Squad Now You Know. This is the podcast dedicated to performance in the automotive industry, and today I'm happy to be joined by a leader, a pioneer in the field of performance in automotive racing, Randy Meyer from Randy Meyer Racing, top fuel veteran, top alcohol champion. Randy, welcome to Now You Know.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
We've talked about other elements of racing, what goes into your history, your career in the field, how you built your own cars. And that's fascinating to me when you mentioned that you built vehicles the way you thought they needed to be built because you didn't know how they shouldn't be built. You didn't know what wouldn't work, and so you found all that out. Talk about the experimentation, the creativity aspect that goes into building a modern race car.
Well, one thing that, like I said, I'm not a follower, so I like to kind of create my own path and stuff when I go do things. So I built all my chassis from ground up years ago, and all of them until just recently when I don't have the time right now, have I helped the guy get in a chassis build a little bit and help him kind of get going. So he builds my cars now for me. But, it's kind of building a car and maintaining a car and even tuning a car. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. And, a lot of people go down the same road because they copied off of somebody else. So that's all they know. I'm the type of guy that I'm not afraid to step off the ledge a little bit and push my stuff past the edge. And I think that sometimes it gets me in trouble with the rules because we go out once in a while and the thing runs really fast, and then they want to slap your hands because you worked really hard or you tried something out of the box, and a lot of it doesn't work, but once in a while you do find something that works. And the nice thing about my program is nobody else knows what I'm doing because I'm the only guy that knows, and I take care of all that. And so I never hire a crew chief to do my deal or take care of my stuff. So I learn as I go, but and I think that's kind of the old school way of racing. That's kind of how I kind of grew up back when I got in racing. I didn't have no money, didn't have much knowledge. So you just kind of learn as you go, and you learn from your mistakes and try not to make them over and over again. But that's where the reward comes in, I think, versus the guy today that just gets a big checkbook out. He's got a big checkbook, so he thinks he's going to buy a championship. And I've raced against some guys with the great big checkbooks, and we beat them 9 out of 10 times. We'll beat them because they just think that they can buy everything, but you can't buy certain things. There's certain things you have to earn, and you have to, the only one way you're going to get it. And that's one thing that when I rent my cars out, the people that get to drive them, they have the luxury of going fast sometimes, just like Hunter the other day when he won Topeka, Kansas, around a 5:16, and not very people in this world in the alcohol class have ever run in the teens, much less him doing a couple times and go as quick as a 5:16. And my girls all been quick, and Megan owns the world record and stuff with a 5:09. So we, feel really, really good about that, and nobody can take that away from us, even though they try to slow us down with rule changes. And the bad thing is it makes everybody mad because it affects the whole class. It doesn't just affect me. But when it happens, you just got to dig deeper and harder and try to find something else. You got to have good components along the way and good support along the way. And we've been able to put that together with what I have. Then Megan's been able to help me a lot to keep and maintain that. But, if you don't have good oil in your motor, you're probably going to have motor damage. If you don't have good spark plugs, you're probably not going to run good. And good pistons and rods and things of that nature. And we learn over the years what's good and what's bad and what works and what don't work for us. And again, I don't really care what anybody else runs. That's up to them. But I think, like I said, that's what satisfies me, is being able to do something on my own and not buy or copy somebody else, and but when you get lost, sometimes you can get lost pretty bad, and it can be pretty expensive trying to get your way back to where you need to be. And I've been there many
Yeah.
times.
Yeah. Now, Randy, you started by building your own bracket car back in the early '80s, and then you progressed to Top Fuel. Did you build your own Top Fuel vehicles, or did you drive for another team?
Never drove for anybody else. I built all my own cars, and I built a few cars for some other people that wanted cars stuff, because that's kind of how I made some of my racing money for nights and weekends when I was younger. We worked till midnight every night. Weekends, if we weren't racing, I was in the shop. I had a nice little fab shop that we do motor parts, do chassis work, whatever, and mainly around dragsters has kind of been my forte all my life. Is I don't never really drove a door car down the racetrack, and I have a funny car that we've been playing with a little bit. That's kind of a new adventure I put on myself, and we're going to run it more next year. But we parked it for the rest of this year to focus on trying to win a championship with Julie and the dragster and stuff. But
Got it. Got it.
so
So let's talk. And now Randy Meyer Racing is in the Top Alcohol program. Let's talk about the differences, really, that you find that you're dealing with, the differences between Top Fuel and Top Alcohol. Kind of an overview for those of us for those of our audience who don't necessarily understand the difference in cars, because frankly, they can tend to look very similar. The fuel and the alcohol cars can look similar if you're looking at them from a distance. What are those differences?
So there's basically, you got three different configurations. You have a blown alcohol dragster, you have a what we call A fuel, which is just injected nitro, no blower, and then you have the top fuel, which has got a blower on it with nitromethane. The the blown alcohol dragster, which is top alcohol, in that series class, you can run either a blower with alcohol or nitromethane without a blower, which is what we run. So all three of the cars look similar from a distance going down the racetrack, because they're all long, they're all skinny, they all got two parachutes on them. The difference is, like, an alcohol car has a small front wing, an A fuel car has a medium size, and like a top fuel has a great big front wing. And same thing in the rear. If you look in the rear, the alcohol car will have a small, shorter wing, because they don't have near the torque that we need, so they don't have the downforce. And then you have the A fuel, which has a medium sized wing that's up in the air, and then you have the top fuel, which has a bigger wing yet. And some of the A fuel cars, they use old top fuel cars and just take the blower off and kind of use that configuration, because it's a cheaper way to get into the sport. But I think the thing that probably helps me out is the fact that when I run a blown alcohol car, I set the world record a long time ago, and obviously it's been broke many times since. But I also won a world championship with blown alcohol cars, so I kind of learned things about that. And then when I did the top fuel deal, even though the car was similar and it had a blower on everything else, we had different fuel, and we didn't have a transmission no more, because back then, and still today, when you run a blown alcohol car, you have a 3-speed transmission that you got to shift twice going down the racetrack. Whereas a top fuel car or injected nitro car, there is no transmission. We just slip the clutch all the way down through there till about half track before it actually tries to lock up and goes 1-to-1. So you have that variation with you got two cars that are blowers on them, but different fuels, and you have two cars that have no transmissions. One has a transmission, and then you have, if you look at the A fuel deal, it's a little bit of both. It's a small cubic inch. We run 421s, which is the smallest motor out there, whereas like a blown alcohol car will run like 471 and a little bit bigger, and top fuel cars all run 500 cubic inches. So the fact that we can take a naturally aspirated, non-blowing car with a small cubic inch and go as fast as we do is pretty amazing, because we have no clutch management like you have on top fuel. So if we could manage our clutch, we would actually be running a lot faster than we do now. We could probably be in the 4-second zone.
Yeah, your drivers have to be incredibly skilled with their footwork.
No, actually, an A fuel car is the easiest thing to drive because the fact you leave it a dead idle like top fuel. You have to be more skilled to drive a blown alcohol car than you do an A fuel dragster, and that's why the A fuel dragster makes a great rental car because basically you drive it a lot like a torque converter. You just step on the gas and it just starts sawing through the clutch until it gets hot enough. It kind of welds itself together, then it locks up and takes off down through there. So like anything else, if you get too aggressive with the clutch, you'll smoke the tires. If you're not aggressive enough, you're probably going to get outrun. There's a fine line, just like a top fuel car. You'll see them, they'll go along and then they'll start smoking the tires down track or something. Similar type deal, except they have clutch management so they can control it a lot easier. Mm-hmm. And I think probably one of the things that's helped me over the years versus some of the other guys I race with that struggle is the fact that I have top fuel experience. So I know how to make power. I know a little bit about that. So basically, we took something similar and took the blower off and understand. I understand how clutch works and how to operate a clutch and everything else, where a lot of people don't, and they struggle with that. So, and what's ironic is that today we're running faster with my fuel car than I did with my top fuel car back in the '80s and stuff. So so we're, even though we're doing it without a supercharger right now, we're running not quite the mile an hour, but we're running DETs pretty much the same as we did back then. So I think that gives me a little bit of edge as far as tuning and knowing what doesn't work. And sometimes knowing what doesn't work is more important than knowing what does work, because right. You lay around in bed all night and you're always thinking about stuff. And then the next day you apply some of it, and and like I said, a lot of it doesn't work, but sometimes you get lucky and hit on something that works, and you go out. And the other thing that people, because nitro cars, especially A fuel cars, run strictly on torque. Because when we ran 285 mile an hour years ago, we were under 7,000 RPM to run 285 mile an hour. And a lot of guys think that they need to rev the motors up, but the more you rev the motors up, the more you're slipping a clutch and you're not going forward. So we run low RPM, high torque on our stuff, and it hauls the mill pretty good. But a lot of people, they want to run them like a blower car and get the motors, get their RPMs up and everything. And that's where a lot of them struggle too. They don't understand that it's very similar to a diesel. And stuff is that you load it and it's all about torque. It's not about RPM. So RPM is what kills a lot of parts too. So I think that's why we've been very fortunate that we can run our parts for a long, long time, because we're not out there over revving them like the blower guys are and stuff, tearing stuff up as bad.
How big of a learning curve is it then to get a driver who may be used to running real high RPMs to bring it back so that they're not stressing it like that?
Probably almost all my drivers had no experience of that. Okay. They've been running smaller cars, and usually most of them come out of super comp, so they're not used to any of that. So they're used to an automatic. The biggest thing is they're used to a button on the steering wheel. Mm-hmm. And the biggest problem I have training people is to teach them that it has a foot clutch in it, not a foot brake, and it has a handbrake. And we have trouble with them. They're so focused on cutting the light, they step on the gas, they forget to let go of the brake, even though the car moves, because it'll pull you out of the brakes. They make so much power, but it kind of messes the tune-up up pretty bad. But that's the biggest thing, is people aren't used to using a handbrake. And the other thing is, most of these younger people that have been driving never use a clutch pedal in their life, because all the cars today they drive are automatics. So unless you grew up in the 60s and 70s where everything was manual, mm-hmm. or on a farm where everything you had was manual, these late models people, they don't even know what a clutch is. That's my biggest thing, is teaching not how to drive the race car as much as how to drive, period, and how to back up. When you're backing up and they can't stick their head out the window to see where they're going, and there's no, they don't know how to use mirrors anyhow, but you got to pay attention and believe the person in front of you and stuff. But that's the biggest thing, is just to get them. But the people that have run super comp, they're used to doing a burnout over the line and have to back up. But people that have never drove, like when the girls did, when they went from juniors, you always do short burnouts. And then when the first time they did super comp, they went past the line, and they said that was their biggest fear, is backing up, not knowing what's behind them and stuff. And once they overcome that, they did good. And put a person out in front of them with a fuel card for safety reasons to let them know what's going on, or if they need to stop or whatever. That's the main reason why the person's out there. It's not that they don't know how to drive. It's more for safety. So if there's a leak and somebody's cleaned the track up or bent over or whatever, you can tell them to stop or whatever. It's so.
Right. So the girls, your daughters, who race now, they grew up racing junior dragsters. How involved were you with the development of the junior cars that they drew, the junior dragsters that they drove?
Basically, all I did was kind of we bought a couple old used cars. They weren't much. They were just cheap beginner cars because I put a program together where I would pay for half and they would pay for half. So that's all the money they could scrape up. So I said, I watched when we went to racetrack, we seen other people that had brand new cars, brand new trucks and trailers, and 3 races later, they're for sale because their kid didn't like it. They did it because they wanted to do it, and they tried to push their kids into it. And even when my kids were old enough to go junior racing, everybody's like, "You got to buy them juniors." I said, "No, I don't." I said, "That's not the right way to do it." I said, if they want to race, they'll come to me and we'll talk about it. We'll set up a program, and they're going to get involved and so on and so forth. And they did. But I just kind of took the cars apart and we worked on them together, and I showed them, and I went to a handful of races with them, and about the third or fourth one, I remember one of them, she broke out or whatever, dialing right. She said, "You don't know how to dial a car." And I said, "You're right." I said, "I don't like bracket racing, never did. That's why I got out of it." I said, "You just dial your own car. That way I don't have to worry about getting yelled at no more." My kids. So they just took it on themselves and stuff. And I said, it's all on you now. And I knew that if they were going to race, they were going to have to do it on their own because I was working a lot, and then I would travel with my deal. And then I had some rental ride programs I was committed to. So I had to honor them and stuff. But, if I was available, I went to the racetrack if I was around town. But a lot of times I was either gone or taking care of business or something. So, yeah. And again, like I told them, I said, if you want to do this, you're going to do it. It's not about me doing it, because I said, I'm not the one that wants to do this. You want to do it, but I'll support you some and I'll get you headed in the right direction, but it's up to you to take it from there.
Right. There have been obviously significant changes in the sport since you started. Who would have guessed that consistently running over 300 miles an hour in top fuel, who would have guessed pro stock without carburetors back in the days, or going over 200 miles an hour in pro stock, the kinds of things that we've seen develop. What have been some of the surprising changes that you've seen in the racing field? Have they been more on technology? Have they been more on, attitude and general attention to the sport? Where do you see some of those changes that have occurred?
Well, I think a lot of it is whenever years ago when they finally started putting some, and they weren't very good, but Dale Armstrong and guys put some computers on the cars, and they were actually seeing some things that were going on that nobody really knew was going on. And they were smart enough. They were so far ahead of their time when he was doing that I think Bernstein was driving, and they next thing you know, they're leaps and bounds ahead of everybody because they had this technology that nobody else had. And I think the technology of that allowed the people that were innovators to take that knowledge and do something with it and go better instead of guessing a lot of times. Because, there's times when we go out, we race, and the computer fails and other people are panicking. "Oh, my computer's not working." I said, just run like old school. We've never done that before. I said, I grew up with no computer. So I said, I know I can tune a car without a computer. I can look at the time slip and kind of look at the motor parts, and that's still how I tune my stuff off of the spark plugs and the bearings and stuff, and know kind of where we're at. But I think the computer is what really opened the door for not just racing, but a lot of things in general. And there's been some pretty smart people come along the way, and there's been some people that brought some money to the table that allowed the technology to expand and do a lot of experimenting stuff. And I think similar to us, when people started adding a second car team, you didn't get twice the knowledge. Sometimes you got 3 times the knowledge because of the fact that you're able to test and learn something and because you can try something on each car, each run that you go down the racetrack and qualifying or whatever the case may be. So that changed a lot, I think, in that era. But when they came up with the billet heads, and then they followed up with a billet block, they made the blocks so much stronger that the blocks were staying round and the cylinders were staying round, and the crankshafts weren't falling on the ground and stuff. So it's just like everything else. You create the next weakest link, and the weakest link for a while there was the blocks. And then when we come up with billet blocks, it made huge differences in strides, because now we can lean on our stuff. Now the cylinders stay round, the crankshaft stays round, it's not falling out. Because before, you were putting bearings in every run because the block was moving around so bad. You used the crank to hold the block together, and neither one of them were happy. And same way with the sleeves, the cast block, and especially in the old days when they had water in them and they had water jacks, there's no support for the sleeves, and people didn't realize how bad they were out around. So that technology the billet blocks and stuff has really come a long, long way to allow people to lean on their stuff longer. And it's made it a lot cheaper to race in the long run, because like now, if we kick a rod out of a billet block, we just weld it back up and put it back in. We've got stuff we get hurt 2 or 3 or 4 times. We just keep running. Whereas the cast block, 9 out of 10 times, just threw it in trash because it was just broke, too far gone. It wasn't worth fixing. You couldn't fix it. And if you tried to fix it, there was so much oil in the pores because it was so porous that you couldn't even hardly weld on it. It was so bad stuff. So you just threw them away. So, we got blocks that we've had in there probably 10 years old now that we're still running. Wow. And stuff. So we, that's gotten better. The fasteners that ARP makes has gotten better and stuff. So they want the better tool steel, better material on that stuff. The yield strength is better, so you can get a better clamp load, keep the head gaskets on better. So it's just the people willing to try something different and try to make something better over and over. So I think what's made it these guys the top fuel guys that could afford having a blower dyno, for example, they could run their blowers on dyno and not have to waste a run down the racetrack, because it's so hard to go out and duplicate a run on a racetrack back to back, because you make a run, you come back and the tires are different, the track conditions change, the weather changed a little bit. And the biggest change that people don't think about is you took out the clutch and you put in 4 or 5 or 6 different discs, and they're all different. Yeah. They're each disc has its own characteristic, even though you might think they're the same or the same batch or the same part number, but they're not the same, because every time you run them and the hotter they get, they change the coefficiency of them and the hardness of them and stuff. So they're not the same. So when you do a blower dyno, you eliminate all them variables. You know exactly then what your blower is, and then you go down the road 3 or 4, 6 months. If your car's running bad, you just put the blower on dyno and say, well, hey, the blower's down. That's my problem. Or the blower's not down, so my problem's somewhere else. We don't have that luxury to put a complete motor on like you do with an alcohol car or a pro stock or a gas motor car on dyno. So nitro motors, you pretty much got to learn by stepping on the gas. And then a lot of them got fuel pumps now where they got flow vents and everything, so they can run their complete fuel system on a bench in the shop before they ever hit the key on the car to start it up, and kind of know where they're at. They got a baseline, so you get going 6 months, or you want to start out next year, you know where you left off and where your stuff was, and so that technology has helped a lot too. The tires are a lot better than they used to be. They're not coming apart as bad as they were. So Goodyear's done a good job with the tire technology as well. So I mean, and we've had a bunch of clutch problems. The clutch stuff today is getting a little better. It was really good 5-6 years ago when we were running good and we won all the championships, and then we kind of used up our really good stuff and been struggling like everything else that went through COVID. There were some changes, and manufacturers went out of business, suppliers went out of business, and people tried to cut corners to save money. And unfortunately, that's one of the areas that really struggled, and most teams have been battling that battle for the last couple of years and stuff. And it's like you look at the people like the Torrances, for example, they're kind of like, we were running good, they were running good, and we have one common problem is that we all used up our good clutch stuff. And it's not that we forgot how to win or Torrance forgot how to win. It's just that some people still had, because they didn't do very good before, they had enough stuff carry over to run good. Like Grubnick told me last year, he said with Redney's car, he said, we got enough to do good this year, but he said, we're going to struggle next year. And they have, because they're struggling to try to find some kind of a happy clutch program like most people do.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned some of the things you can do, say in the case of a computer failure at the track. Let's talk about the your between run protocol. What do you do when when you've made a run during qualifying, practice or qualifying? What do you do when the car comes back to the pits? What's your procedure?
So our typical procedure after we make a run is we come back, we take the spark plugs out, we look at the plugs, how good they look. We'll do a leak down on the motor to see how bad the cylinders are leaking. We have a certain range. If they're out of that range, then we'll pull the heads off. And typically, you're either going to find the bad rings, or you're going to find a valve that's leaking, whether it's bent. And because part of what happens is after a run and the motor shuts off, the valves are usually red hot, and you'll typically have two cylinders that the valves are wide open. And when the valves are red hot, because the motor's the valves don't lay flat, they're at a 45-degree angle, they'll droop. And then when you get back and you go turn the motor over by hand, them two valves are going to leak a little bit. So depends on, where you're at. And the last thing you ever want to do with a nitro motor is put a wrench on and turn the motor by hand, because you're just asking for a bomb to go off because you got a lot of heat in it and everything. So you never touch it after you shut it off. You just leave it until you get the plugs out of it. So, and depending on how bad it's leaking, if it's not too bad, we've done this over and over. We'll go back and just leave it and run it. And next run, them valves will be good, and two other ones will be leaking. So you can chase yourself all day long, as long as you don't have a burnt seat or a burnt valve. A little bit of warpage, once it gets hot and you got a lot of spring pressure, it'll pretty much seal itself back up, because it's like a big wedge. When it closes, it just wedges itself right in there. So we do that, and then we'll pull the pan and we'll take the bearings out. And we take all the rod bearings out and we put in a new set. And then we measure. What I do is I measure all the rod bearings. So that determines my tune-up, what I'm going to do for the next run, how much it moves the bearings. If the bearings are moving a lot or they're not moving at all, that determines whether I can lean on the motor harder or I'm ready pushing it too hard, and this motor's getting where it's not real happy and stuff. So we look for that happy zone to where the thing is moving the bearings but not destroying the bearings. And then that's when we know that we got the motor exactly as much power as we're going to be able to make. And then we take that and then we work on the clutch program. So we come back and we pull the clutch out of it, and then we'll put a different fresh clutch in it every run. We have 4 discs and 3 steel floater plates in between the discs. And so we grind them and we put them back. We have a whole trailer full of them, so we don't necessarily put them back in, but we'll put a clutch pack assembly that's exactly the same thickness that what we took out. That way we never have to adjust the pedals or have to adjust anything. We can do it. We can put a clutch in 15 minutes and be ready for the next run and stuff. So, and then we'll look at the clutch and see how bad it's wearing and see if it's getting hot, if we think we're slipping it too much, and then we'll make some adjustments on the clutch as well. So basically we put a fresh clutch in every run. We put 8 rod bearings in it, and a lot of times the bearings go back in if they're still good. We don't throw them away. The ones that are bad we'll throw away, but we may put the bearings in 4, 5, 6, 7 times before we pitch them. And then we'll put a new set of NGK spark plugs in it. We put new plugs in every single run. So we go through a lot of plugs, and we're very fortunate that NGK is one of our primary sponsors that helps us with that, because we go through 16 plugs every time we go down the racetrack. And we put 5 gallons of nitro in it to get ready for the next run.
5 gallons. How long does the nitro last? Is it burned in that run in quarter mile?
We use 5 gallons to make the burnout and make the pass every run. So we have 9-gallon tanks. So we have a little bit. We carry 9 gallons on the car for front ballast, and got to keep the fuel line holds too. And then we figure we got 1 gallon in case we got somebody jacking us around on the starting line that doesn't want to stage or play games, or if we have a little problem, so you don't run yourself out of fuel too much. So we carry an extra gallon for that, but gotcha. We have enough to keep the line full by the finish line out there. So, because once you get a certain speed, the front wing will take over, and then you don't need the ballast as much as you did when you leave the starting line to keep the front end on the ground. But once you get going, the front wing will take over.
Got it.
Front end down.
Just old school aerodynamics right there.
Yeah.
And old school diagnostics. You're warming our hearts here on the aftermarket side. So, Randy, it's been a pleasure talking to you about the again, kind of the old school technology, but what's involved in the latest and greatest racing elements today. Thanks so much for spending time with us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I hope we can talk again soon. What's next for the race team?
The rig just left a little bit ago to Indy. We're running the U.S. Nationals this weekend, so I'm staying back, do a bunch of work here at my truck shop, and I'll fly in Thursday. But we got a big weekend up there. We're going to try to get Julie back in the points deal. We led the points most of the year, but we kind of stumbled the other day on a race, and a couple of people went around us. So hopefully we can get that back and have the rest of a good year at the end of the year. She's off to a good start. She's got a good chance. So we got a good chance anybody win the championship. We just it's going to come down now. There's about 5 of us as far as who makes the least mistakes is going to win the championship.
Awesome. Well, best of luck to the team for the rest of the season. You with everything going on. Thanks again for talking to us, and I hope we can talk again soon.
No problem. Anytime. Thank you. Appreciate it.